Father, we're so thankful for this day that you've given to us, and most importantly, our mothers. Help us to honor them as you've encouraged us to do, even as from the Old Testament back to the Ten Commandments. It was the first commandment with a promise to honor our parents. And so, Father, today as we talk about moms and we talk about your word, help us to honor them, Father, in a way that will be meaningful. And it's through Christ we pray. Amen. So as you can see, it's about the invisible mom. And the passage is taken from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 18. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things that we cannot see will last forever. So moms in particular, it's entirely possible that you could use just a little bit of rest right now, because by the time you've got the house humming and the kids running and the bills paid and the meals made and life begins to look orderly, it just starts all over again, doesn't it? Sometimes you just need a break. And the truth of the matter is, you're not alone. In fact, I want you to consider the consequences of this particular burden and see if you can guess its cause. It afflicts 70 million Americans every year and is faulted for 38,000 deaths each year. The condition annually costs the United States of America 70 billion with a B worth of productivity. Teenagers suffer from it, and studies show that 64% of teens blame this for poor school performance. Middle-agers, well, they face it too. Researchers say that the most severe cases of this condition occur between the ages of 30 and 40. And, not to be left out, even senior citizens are afflicted by it. One study suggesting that it impacts 50% of people who are 65 years of age and older. Now, the treatments for this particular condition include everything from mouth guards to herbal teas to medication. Can you guess what's being described? Chemical abuse? Divorce? No, I think the answer might just surprise you. It's insomnia. America just can't seem to get to sleep. Now, for most of my life, I secretly laughed at the thought of people having sleep difficulties, because my problem growing up was never being able to go to sleep. My problem was being able to stay awake. But a few years ago, I went to bed one night, closed my eyes, and nothing. I couldn't fall asleep. Rather than slowing to a halt, for some reason my mind just kind of kicked into high gear, and 1,001 obligations ran across my mind, and midnight passed and I'm still awake. So I go into the kitchen, get some warm milk, return to bed. Nothing. I'm still awake. So I woke up my wife asking the blue ribbon of dumb questions. Honey, are you awake? And she told me to quit thinking. Quit thinking about stuff and get some sleep. So I did exactly as my wife had instructed. I quit thinking about stuff. But then I started thinking about people. And I thought of what those people were doing. They were sleeping. And that made me even more angry and more upset. Finally, somewhere in the early hours of the morning, and now an initiate into the 70 million sleepless Americans, I dozed off to sleep. So I don't laugh at the thought of sleep difficulties anymore, nor do I really question the inclusion of the verse about rest contained in the 23rd Psalm. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. People with too much work and too little sleep apparently step over the baggage claim of life and grab a duffel bag of exhaustion. And it's not the kind of duffel bag that you can carry. You can't even hoist it onto your shoulder and stroll down the street. I mean, you just drag it around like a lazy Labrador. Weariness just wearies, doesn't it? So why are we so tired? Well, I mean, have you read the news lately? We long for a life of like Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, living life big on the Mississippi River. But look at us. I mean, we are riding the white waters of the Rio Grande River, where there are forks in the river and rocks in the water. There are heart attacks, there's betrayal, there's credit card debt, and custody battles. Huck and Tom didn't ever have to face those kinds of challenges. But we do. And when we do, they keep us awake. And since we can't sleep, we have a second problem. Our bodies are tired. Now I want you to think about it. Think about if 70 million Americans aren't sleeping enough, what does that really mean? It means that a third of our country is dozing off at work, napping through class, or sleeping at the wheel. The truth is that 30 tons of aspirin, sleeping pills, and tranquilizers are consumed every day to treat this condition. And it's as if the gas gauge on the dashboard of our lives says empty. And were we to invite someone to solve our problem, they'd probably make an amazingly simple suggestion, and that would be, well, get more sleep. But we'd laugh, because clearly they don't understand the way that we work. Literally, we work hard. There's money to be made. There's degrees to be obtained. There's ladders to climb. And in our way of thinking, busyness is next to godliness. We idolize someone like Thomas Edison, who claimed to live on 15-minute naps. But somehow we forget to mention someone like Albert Einstein, who averaged 11 hours of sleep a night. Back in 1910, Americans slept, on average, 9 hours a night. Today, it's 7, and we're proud of it. But pride has its price, doesn't it? Our minds are tired. Our bodies are tired. And more importantly, our souls are tired. We are eternal creatures, and we ask eternal kinds of questions like, where did I come from? Where am I going? What is the meaning of life? What's right? What's wrong? Is there life after death? These are the primal questions of each of our souls. And left unanswered, these questions steal our rest. Only one other creature has as much trouble resting as we do. And it's not dogs, because they doze off. It's not bears, they hibernate. Cats invented the catnap, and sloths slumber 20 hours a day. Most animals in God's creation know how to rest. There is one exception, however. These creatures are woolly, simple-minded, and slow. And no, that's not your husband. It's sheep. And sheep can't sleep. For sheep to sleep, everything has to be exactly right. No predators, no tension in the flock, no bugs in the air, no hunger in the stomach. Everything has to be just so. Unfortunately, sheep cannot find safe pasture, nor can they spray insecticides to get rid of the bugs. They can't deal with the frictions in their own little camp, and they can't even find food for themselves. They need help. They need a shepherd to lead them and help them to lie down in green pastures. Without a shepherd, they can't rest. And without a shepherd, neither can we. In the second verse of the 23rd Psalm, David, the poet, becomes David the artist. His quill becomes more like a paintbrush, and his parchment becomes more like a canvas. And his words paint a beautiful picture. It's a picture of a flock of sheep on folded legs encircling the shepherd. Their bellies are nestled deep in green grass, and a still pond is on one side, and the shepherd is on the other. He makes me to lie down in still waters. And I want you to note, if you would, the pronouns preceding the two verbs. He makes me and he leads me. So when you think about it, who is the active one here? Who's in charge? Well, it's the shepherd. The shepherd selects the trail. The shepherd prepares the pasture. The sheep's job is to follow the shepherd. And with our eyes on the shepherd, we'll be able to get some sleep. As Isaiah the prophet wrote in Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3, "You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you." And in fact, in the 10 declarations carved onto the tablets, which one of those 10 commandments occupies the most space? Murder? Adultery? Stealing? Well, you'd think so. Certainly each one is worthy of ample coverage. But curiously, these commandments are tributes to brevity, because God needed only 5 English words to condemn adultery and only 4 to denounce thievery and murder. But when he came to the topic of rest, one sentence wouldn't suffice. Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. "Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons and your daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the 7th day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath and set it apart as holy." Church, you know that God knows us so well. He can see the business owner reading this verse and then thinking, "Oy, but somebody needs to be running the business that day. So if I can't, I know, I'll have my son do it." And God says, "No, not your son." "Okay, well then my daughter will run the business." "No, not your daughter either." "Okay, well then I'll have an employee open the business." "Nope, not even an employee." "Okay, then I guess I'll send my cow to run the store, or some stranger in to help me open my business." Seriously? I mean, one day of the week, you'll say no to work and yes to worship. You will slow down, you will sit down, you will lie down, and you will rest. And still we object. But, who's going to run the business? What about my grades? Or I've got my sales quota that I need to make. We offer up one reason after another, but God silences all of them with just one poignant reminder. In 6 days, the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the seventh day, he rested. God's message, I think, is pretty plain. If creation didn't crash when I rested, it's not going to crash when you do either. But then again, maybe we work so hard and rest so little because we think, especially mothers, that we're invisible. You know, the blank stares, the lack of response, the way one of the kids will walk into the room while you're on the phone and ask you to take them to the store. And inside, you're probably thinking, can't you see that I'm on the phone? Well, obviously not. No one can see if you're on the phone. No one can see if you're cooking. No one can see if you're sleeping the floor or even standing on your head in the corner of a room for that matter, because no one can see you at all. It's as if you're invisible. The invisible mom. And some days, you're only a pair of hands and nothing more. Can you fix this, Mom? Can you tie that, Mom? Can you open this, Mom? On other days, you're a clock who gets asked, what time is it? Or maybe you're just that day an Uber. Like, I need to get to school at a certain time. Some days you're even a crystal ball. The kids say, where are my socks? Or, where is my phone? I don't know. Let me call it and we'll find out. And my personal favorite, hey, what's for dinner? And over time, maybe you've concluded that the hands that once held books and eyes that once studied maybe history or music or literature are now a thing of the past. Now? Now your hands have disappeared into the peanut butter, never to be seen again. And there you are. There's Mom. She's going, gone. In his book, Great Cathedrals, Bernard Schutz, who is a professor of architectural history at the University of Munich, describes in marvelous detail the great cathedrals of Europe. From Chartres to the Cathedral of Florence, his hardcover book covers the major Romanesque and Gothic cathedrals in France, in England, in Germany, in Italy, and Spain, some of which I actually was able to enjoy. In it, this book, there are over 300 color photographs showing the cathedrals both inside and out, including close-up architectural and sculptural details that, when combined with his text, give you a virtual tour of these magnificent buildings. And although you may not necessarily have the time or the inclination to read this 8-pound book, which comprises 472 pages, even a modest reading reveals the cathedral's beauty in the simplicity of what they represent. And here's what I mean. You see, no one can actually say who built these great cathedrals because there's no record of the general contractor who was responsible for their construction. Nevertheless, the builder gave his or her whole life for a work that they would never see finished and made unbelievable sacrifices without ever expecting to receive credit. The passion of their construction was fueled by their faith that the eyes of the God whom they served saw everything. In fact, a story of legend is reported in this book that tells the story of a rich man who came to visit a cathedral that was in construction. And he saw this workman way up high carving a tiny little bird on the inside of a beam, like that one. And the rich man was puzzled, and he asked the artist, who was way up there, "Why are you spending so much time carving that puny little bird into a beam that will be covered by the roof? No one is ever going to see it." And looking down from his scaffold, and with the utmost faith and sincerity, the workman humbly replied, "Because God sees." You see, moms, God sees. And God sees you. He sees the sacrifices you make every day, even when no one around you does. No act of kindness you've ever done, no sequin you've ever sewn on, no cupcake you've ever baked, no Girl Scout meeting you failed to attend, no last-minute errand is too small for our God to not notice. You're building a great cathedral. You just can't see it right now, what it will eventually become. So rather than being invisible, exhausting yourself in an attempt to be seen, you are instead a great builder. You moms are the ones who show up at the job that you'll never see finished to work on something that your name will never be on. Imagine being a 14th century bricklayer. You work your entire life adding a few more feet to a wall of a building that you will never see completed. What does it matter, you say? Well, if you've ever seen the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which took nearly 200 years to finish, you know why it matters. The truth is that these cathedrals could never have been built in a single person's lifetime, largely because there were so few people willing to sacrifice to the same degree as the builder. And when you think about it, do you really want your child to tell the friend he or she might be bringing home from college, let's say for Thanksgiving, "Yes, my mom gets up at 4 a.m. and bakes homemade pies, and then she bastes the turkey for 3 hours, and then she presses all the linens for the table"? Do you really want your child to say that? That would be building a monument to yourself, wouldn't it? Instead, don't you just want your child to come home? And then, if there's anything more to say to their friend or friends, wouldn't you rather just hear them say, "You know what, you're going to love it here"? I think that's probably the case. So as mothers, you are building great cathedrals. The thing is that you can't always be seen doing it, especially if you're doing it right. But one day, the world may very well marvel at not only what you've built with God's help, but at the beauty that's been added to the world because of the sacrifices of invisible moms just like you. And even if you're not the 8th wonder of the world, God knows, God cares, God sees, and God knows, as Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18, the things that we see now will soon be gone, but the invisible will last forever. Happy Mother's Day. Our moms, in so many ways, are unsung heroes. They go about their work, They raise their family, they invest their time, they sacrifice unendingly to allow their children to have a better life than they did. And many times, moms will pass away without seeing the end result of the work that they've been so diligently providing and never, ever asking for any credit. Because that's what moms do. So if you're a mom, a grandma, a great-grandma, God bless you and thank you for making the sacrifices that you did. It hasn't been easy. And as you know, once a mom, you're always a mom. I mean, I thought growing up that once, if the Lord was willing to bless me with children, that once they're 18, you kick them out of the house and then you get to party. And I found out that's not the case. Because as a dad, I still worry about my kids. And I know if I do that as a dad, I know moms do too. The job is never complete, but it will not be without its reward, whether you see it now or you see it when you're with Jesus. Your efforts will be rewarded, and thank you. I forgot to mention that if you have any prayer requests, you could tear out that section of the bulletin. Most of you are aware of that. And if you have any kind of prayer requests, you can hand them up while Steve leads us in this song here in just a moment. We'll talk about those prayer requests. We'll pray about them, and then we'll be dismissed. And I'm running on time, so that if you have an engagement for, let's say, a Mother's Day luncheon, you'll be able to successfully leave here by or before noon. Happy Mother's Day. Let's stand and let's sing, please.